my Photo 130 online students, this is going to be a combined week for the intro video as well as the wrap-up video. My on-campus sessions are running open lab where they have time to work what would be essentially their in-class hours on the particular projects that are coming up. So essentially we're going to wrap these up together. I've already had all the on-campus sessions held for this week, and there's been some nuances that have come out, things that were not covered on those flipped classroom materials that you should be able to access via YouTube if you haven't hopped out to there just yet. But I want to make sure that there's additional information to cover and that we get through that and then answer any sort of questions that have come up as well on the in-class on-campus sessions. So if you're out on the home page in the news section, you see I do have the information listed out there for week 5 in section 930C, which is you guys. Talk about the group critique that's coming up for depth of field that you should be working on this week. Today is Tuesday. Have those completed by Friday afternoon or evening, so it provides time for the person designated, which is person number 2 on that list, to go ahead and put it through a summary of each person's project. That hits up point number 2 on there as well, and then so they at least have Saturday and Sunday, at least 2 days to do that. I do want you to watch the video on the impact of color, which is the next upcoming project that is due at the end of next week. And there is an additional video after that on the process of converting a black and white, or converting a color image to black and white and a duotone image. Comes after that is following the steps is converting an image into duotone so you can complete that exercise. Again, that's due at the end of the week as well. And then again, this is the exercise for the project to show that you can follow through on the steps that are embedded within that video. And posting that JPEG version out into the Dropbox on D2L. If I scroll up, this is the feature that didn't work before, but we have that set up now. I'd be going into the black and white duotone conversion. Once the projects are uploaded here, it'll show up and you're able to see everything that was out there posted by your classmates as well. And I recommend looking into this. You can go ahead and export a JPEG copy of those. It doesn't have to be a Photoshop version. Those tend to get a little heavier and a lot larger when it comes to file type. So this is where you'll be posting the exercise for this week. I apologize. I know the first time around when we did the principles of design exercise, we ended up having to post those to the widen because there was an issue embedded within D2L. So going back out into the news section, what I want you to view is the tutorial information that we have on the impact of color. I'm not going to go ahead and play this in here, but you see that this is the live link. I'm going to press pause really quick. You see a preview of where we start with this. What I am going to do, however, is talk a little bit about some nuances that came up and during the on-campus sessions to make sure that you guys are given the exact same information and relayed the same ideas. So if I were to hop out here, I'm going out to the Widen Collective. I'm logged into that. And I recommend you guys take a look as well. Use these items that are out here. We're able to see stuff that was done in the past. And then go through some guttural reactions when we look at this and the use of color so we fully understand this project. I know the video that we have posted, it's just under 7 minutes, does a great job highlighting some of this information as well. But I just want to take a look at some additional examples that are out here. So impact of color does not have to be something that's really colorful. It can also be a muted scene. If I'm looking at this first image that happens to pop up when I look at color through the Widen Collective, there's not a lot of color happening in here. It's muted, doesn't really tell much of a story. It's more or less a straight on shot, not a lot of interest going through there. If I scroll down a little bit further, it's a little out of season. You can kind of figure that these were taken in the fall semester. It's the impact of color. These colors are across from each other on the color wheel. Really, really strong. Some Photoshop editing was done to bring out the color in here, but it gives us a really basic idea of, having something bright, and it could be juxtaposed against a dull background or equally against a bright background. I will say that, content-wise, a little cliche, but really well shot. So if you're putting together something that you think isn't as original as what it could or should be, it should be really well shot. When we look at the original isn't a far cry. You see that the vibrancy in these colors still stays pretty true. They pump it up a little bit in here. I think this is a good example as well if we're looking at something that is initially probably overlooked. Again, impact of color and kind of the irony of the use of color. Blue is typically really cheerful. We look at this in this particular setting, and it's kind of sad and kind of has this kind of eerie feeling to it. If this were in black and white, it'd still be really graphical because there's a lot of use of line, there's a lot of shape, there's a lot of direction, but we won't get as strong of a story. So this is why we kind of have the overlap with these two topics. They do go hand in hand. So if I'm looking at this particular image, like the colored leaf one, if I'm looking at this, is this going to be stronger in color or in black and white? If your answer is color, which it should be, this is why this is a submission for the color project. It helps tell a story based on the fact that it's in color. If it was in black and white, it'd still be really well shot. It's very crisp. There's a lot of dimension when it comes from light to dark and contrast, but it wouldn't be as impactful as we're seeing it in color. So these images that you'd end up shooting, if they have a similar aesthetic feeling in shape and form, that is perfectly fine, but based on the colors that are included, that's how you figure which project you want to use your shots for. It's not unlikely that you could take these shots on the same day. Something to think about as well. For scrolling down a little bit further, you see that some of these were taken, I would say, on campus October of last year when we still had some flowers in bloom. Stay away from submitting images that have a ton of color. So this is nature's version of a bag of Skittles. And I say bag of Skittles because that is on a no-go list for submissions. Do not submit images that have colorful objects arranged or scattered on the table. Although you're able to capture colorful pieces or objects, it doesn't do anything to tell you a story. So the color that you're using should be part of a narrative that you are creating. These don't have much of a narrative. Are they visually pretty? Sure. But color doesn't play an important part of that narrative. So if I'm scrolling down through here, let's take a look a little bit further. This one, I think it'd be arguable that color is playing a part of a narrative. We have this one live flower juxtaposed against the other ones that are essentially dead. That'd be arguable where you could use a flower in context of whatever else is happening in the image. Scroll down a little bit further. Again, this is something I suggest you do, hopping onto the Widen website and taking a look at stuff that's available. I'll go down a little bit further. You see, fall semester submits a lot of images of leaves. Color can also be a hue that's included. So I'm pulling up an original file. This is unedited. You think about colors and how they make you feel. And how they're usually used. Usually yellows are kind of warming. However, when I look at this image, it is a little unsettling based on stance of this person, whether it's an actor, I'm sure it's this photographer's friend, and the overall feeling that we get when we see this. So this is use of color in the background, essentially impact of color helps with the content of the subject matter that's included. Scroll down a little bit further. This is a good example. I always pull up with this one because further down the line, drawn towards the edge of my search page, it's going to be a really similar image that includes, may have been shot on the same day, the same skyline. So visually appealing, yes. Does it do much to tell a story? Not so much. Scroll down a little bit further. The rain jacket, again, same use of yellow. Yellow would typically be warming, happy feelings. If we're looking at this, the use of here is kind of ironic because it's unsettling, uncomfortable. I think a certain series of these were shot around October when Stephen King's It came out, so we essentially got a lot of kind of creepy images that were submitted around that time. Again, these have bright colors in them. Not really that interesting when it comes to, like I say, setup of composition. It's just smack dab in the middle, really similar to how the other one is shot. Not incredibly interesting nor creative. Here's some Skittles. Do not shoot pictures like this. I know Easter's coming. I think anything that falls into that colored object of candy, lined up bottles, stay away from doing that because although you're capturing images, you don't want it to look like product photography, well shot or poorly shot. Essentially, if we think about product photography and how that's set up, it's objects that are set up on a really clean white background. This is 25% the way there, but it doesn't do anything to tell the story as we're looking at this, and it's really unplanned and not well done. So scrolling down a little bit further, use of color. Any feelings, like I say, I'm skipping through some of these sections. Looking for that one particular one. This is an interesting juxtaposition. So we have this one particular first use of color. If this were in black and white, it would just look like a dirty knife. That's a really strong content area. But juxtaposed against this one, ironically enough, the same photographer took this. We have this live little section of phlox, the type of flower, against this whole dead background. And then you'll see, if you haven't picked up on this trend yet, the manipulation of aperture or their depth of field. These projects that we have going on go in sequential order on purpose. So you're able to incorporate these technical tools that you've been practicing for the first month into the upcoming projects. So Matt happened to really like the really shallow depth of field. So that's something that he started to work into his following projects. Scroll down a little bit further. In a really graphical image, would it look nice in black and white? Sure. Would you have any idea of the time of year it was shot, which is the whole purpose of capturing it in color? Absolutely not. Scroll down a little bit further as we're going through here. Again, lots of leaves. So once you've seen a couple, you've typically seen them all. So we'll keep going. Stay away from shooting objects, stuffed animals, figurines in places where they don't belong. It's a little kitschy and doesn't really, again, do much to tell a story. Scroll through here. Again, another play on irony with the use of yellow. This is eerie for a number of reasons. The fact that this person's juxtaposed against this background. I use the example, like, if you saw this person in the woods, what would you do? My old classroom said they would essentially turn around and walk away. I guess the color mixed in with the absence of a face and hands and other body parts, which we know exist, but mix in with the irony of this supposedly cheerful yellow. Scroll down a little bit further. Finding more good examples as we go through here. For any and all upcoming projects, do not shoot pictures of textiles and or other people's artwork, designs that have been created by others, even if they have color in them. If it's a part of your whole composition, like if there's a blanket somewhere in your composition, if you're putting together something in your living room and it's part of the composition, okay. But this is just a close-up shot of jackets and that fill up the entire frame. I'm looking for this exact example I'm looking at. And you guys have the ability, if you want to search through some of these as well, similar graphical, but if these were converted into black and white, we would have no idea the contents or context of time of year. Go down a little bit further, find this exact image I'm looking for. And a lot of these focus on having a really bright object against kind of a muted background. That is up to you how you want to handle that again. You can tell the time of year shot around Halloween, kind of ironically cheerful, but more or less unsettling and creepy feeling in some of these photographs. Plates of apples. A mix of color based on, I guess, relatable context. So when I look at these two colors put together, this yellow against this blue, a certain physical location comes to mind, and that's just the beach. It doesn't have to be any particular beach, but the beach in general, based on the colors. So this isn't really a feeling, but it's relatable context to where this should be. Now I know for a fact this is somewhere down in the industrial district in Menominee, Wisconsin, taken during winter time. If you watch the impact of color, there's a probably better composed project featuring this exact building down there. So if you're able to, which you should be able to, frame out your images if it interests you, and exclude the stuff that would tell us that, hey, this is taken in Menominee, Wisconsin in February. So scroll down a little bit further. I'm looking for that one particular image with the backdrop. Impact of color. Okay, there we go. That other shot that has the highline wires and the electrical wires essentially is this shot. However, this one has this human element. So although the other one is visually appealing, the use of color doesn't do much to tell the story. This one, being that there's a human element, gives us more of a storyline, a narrative that's included with it, and the overall color makes this really dramatic and kind of has this, I'm not sure if it's sad or hopeful feeling when you come to looking at the composition. So if there is something that is missing out of your compositions, this person is actually self-portraiture, set up your timer, set up your camera. I wouldn't necessarily recommend setting it up in the middle of the road with your back turned towards it, but consider the elements that are in your composition. Like this one, for many reasons, works better for an impact of color image to have a narrative than the other one, although the other one is still, like I said, visually appealing, but really short on a story. So you see a lot of these other ones include a lot of leaves. Okay, and then I have this other one to pull up, which I think is also really impactful when we look at the edits. Really common question when it comes to the edits for this class as a whole. How much is too much? What am I expected to do? So minor items can be changed. That would be my recommendation, is changing things that you can't change in real life. So this particular person, this is the original shot, has this balloon connected, and I know the string is tied down to a button within the jacket. If we go to the edited version and take a look at it, what we see here is that this string is just been edited out. Some of the highlights have been increased in the shadows, and it looks a little stronger when it comes to contrast and overall vibrance. If this were converted into black and white, I asked my on-campus class, I'm like, what would this look like? And the reaction out of one of my students, which I think is pretty honest and correct, is, circle head is exactly what he said. So think about the objects that are going to change. If this are turned into black and white, this tie area would have the same shape as this. It would almost look like a bad clip art job if we looked at these components that are put together. In color, much more impactful. Interesting in black and white, sure, but I think we'd be really confused about what was happening with the story. It may not seem creepy, it may just look like a bad edit job. So I think this is a really interesting example in between those two. You can see that just minor edits have been made in between those two choices. So I won't scroll down a whole lot further as we're going through here. And, you guys have an opportunity to check some of this out. What I did is I went onto the Widen website and I literally just typed in the word color, and there should be, if they're named correctly, a number of color projects, maybe even a couple pages of them that show up. Oh yeah, 5 pages of items or file names that have the word color in them. So for in between the two projects, there's the Impact of Color project. This one is due next weekend. The black and white and duotone conversion project is due the following weekend. So make sure you take a look at the schedule. For the Impact of Color, there are 2 final images, and that would be, of course, 4 total files. So this is going to be the one where you don't have to do 2 separate, two different types of images. They are going to be 2 images that have an impact of color. For the project that comes after that, just so we're absolutely clear, the black and white and duotone conversion, you're going to end up with 1 black and white image and 1 duotone image. So again, these are 2 completely separate projects that you will be putting together. So what I have on the list for you guys to do this week is to watch the black and white and duotone conversion video. It's about 14.5 minutes long. It's out on YouTube. It has some student examples. It has one that we walked through as well. If I go ahead and take a look out here again, areas that you're able to do that as well, pop through here and I'll just pick on duotone right away. Because duotones always start out as black and white. In order to get to duotone, you have to start out with a color image, convert it to black and white through the proper process, and then add that additional tone. So, and those exact steps are embedded within the video that you have to watch to complete the exercise. So if I go out to here and I type in duotone, and I'm also going to type in the word PSD, so I only see the final images, it narrows it down by half. We get some images that appear back, and I'm just going to pull up a couple of them. So items of color, actually, I lied. I'm not going to type in PSD so we can see some of the originals. Pull this back here really quick. So as you're choosing an additional tone to add to a black and white image, the most common one that most of us are familiar with is basically a sepia tone. If you look at this picture of this donkey or mule, whichever it is, we see that this is a pretty traditional color value that's added. This makes sense for, let's say, images that have skin tones, some images that, let's say, have buildings that may be antiqued in style or a little older, animals with fur. This color tone makes sense. The addition of something like a green wouldn't necessarily make sense for the subject matter. So that's something you'll have to consider when you're creating and choosing the duotone colors that you're added in. If I'm looking up, I'll go back down this way a little bit, and let's choose one. So this is a starting point for our one student submissions. We see this, it's a mum flower, in case you know what this is, against this background where this doesn't belong inside here, it's been placed. And we look at the converted duotone. I think this is a little bit of overkill when it comes to the adjustment into the color. If you pull up the file, it's actually like a really bright green, again, over black tones. And you'll see what I'm talking about if you watch that video and go ahead and look at those levels. So you're always going to start with a white to black area within the duotone curves, and you'll add an additional color on. I will say, if you start with a rather dark image, let's say, let's go through here and look right here. This is a rather dark image. If I'm looking at Taya's Duotone NEF, what she would have had to do, convert this into black and white, and probably add a lighter tone to get this overall feel. Now, she does end up with some digital noise, but that's from the original photograph. This is not for the conversion. But when I look at this, I'm like, okay, so pretty standard shot anywhere in the Midwest. You got this kind of gravel road going to nowhere. And then this adjustment where you look at it and you're like, you're considering, you don't know what decade or century this was essentially from. So I think this was a wise choice in color when it comes to adding a tone to the duotone. You don't have to stick with something safe, but be leery of going too far into something that is really unrealistic and video game-esque. Go down a little bit further. Let's see what else has been submitted for this area. Again, we looked at Taya's picture. That's this one. Does this work better as a duotone image / black and white versus color? Absolutely. Would I print this one off? Probably not. Much more likely to print this off. So tell yourself that as you're setting up compositions that have elements included, you know, and how they're set up and placed. Would I print this one off? Probably not. Same thing, you know, let's go down a little bit further, find some more examples. Oh, I found a one that I'd like to use. So you can really tell the difference in between good editing jobs and what can actually come up from creating a duotone. So if you're scrolling through here, and I'm initially looking at this original pretty flat photo, I usually advise against starting with something that's so overexposed. You know, there's all this light coming in from the sky that takes up a little over 2/3 of the entire image, and this giant reflector, essentially the water down at the bottom. If you haven't spotted it yet, this is the corresponding duotone. This is what happens when you can add in a lot of tones. So if I close this out really quick, I'm actually going to download Pajan's version of it really quick and take a look at this. So if I have this open in Photoshop, and I'm going to go Image, Mode, Duotone. Let's go ahead and take a look at what was added. So what she actually has going on here, if you drop it down, is a tritone. So she still has the black, and then she also has brown added in, and a yellow tone. That's how you get the complexity and the density of these colors mixed together. She had to add in a lot of additional tonnage because her first image was so washed out. So I think this is an interesting insight into here. And then playing around with the duotone settings, you can honestly spend a lot of time adjusting these areas in here, and it will make a major difference. If you're going through and we're looking at the curves, she's got 1, 2, 3 points. Actually, 1, 2, where they've been adjusted, overcounted on there. Smooth curves are best to keep in here. Once you start to get some spikes, it starts to pull out weird sections of the information of the details of your photograph. So smooth curves are where you should stay when it comes to slightly adjusting these. Again, watch the video first and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But you can see the dramatic difference in between point A and, oh, there we go, and point B. I wouldn't print this. I would probably print this image. So things to be considered, you know, the adjustments of duotones and information can bring out a lot of detail, but the detail can't be brought out unless the focus is crisp to start with. So this focus is pretty crisp, but because this is all really similar in color, this brings out a little bit more contrast and actually adds more hues when it comes in. This is a black and white image. So think about these as you're starting to put together images. And key points, you know, because again, these projects are compounding, is starting with a good composition and then with accurate camera settings as well and good focus. So there's a lot of things to be included, and then choosing, you know, as we go through the black and white conversion and then onto the duotone, choosing correctly the adjustments that you want to make. All right, for the next project, we're going to be doing something a little bit different for the critique process, at least for part 1 of it. If you go onto the D2L homepage, you just go through week 5, down in the attachment sections, you're going to see something listed as color critique, self-critique. So if I'm going to go ahead and click on that, I'm just going to download a copy right now as well. You'll see that we have this Word document that is attached. You put your name, impact, and it already has a list of impact of color. It's a self-critique section. I know which section you guys are in. You'd be going through and filling this out, essentially as a way to represent what you did for this project. You know, the voices of the critiquers have been heard for the last 2 projects. This is a chance to present your work and provide some insight before people actually go in to critique the project. This will also be used as part of the form that they'll be putting together, and again, offer them some insight as to your thoughts behind creating the project and what your plan was for each of these images and how color is going to play an impact. And that's in case you saw things or you're working on creating something that they as a group did not see. So if you take a look at this, this is set up really similar to the way the prior critique forms have looked. I narrowed it down a little bit more because I think that makes it a little easier to follow through, and then go through and fill out the information for each of these. Again, this is a self-critique where you're presenting the information off of your particular project and I guess your objective or your purpose for each image. Again, this is currently attached down in the attachment section of this week's news. I'm going to close out of this really quick and I'll show you where you can upload this onto D2L. So it's attached on here, listed as the self-critique for the upcoming color project. And if you go into the Dropbox section right up here, we see that there is a new section, color self-critique, and you can go ahead and drop these in here. That way when we actually get to the point of this project, those other groups, whoever will be actually critiquing the work, can use this document as a guide when it comes to assessing your project. And then they have your input, your insight, I guess, and the objectives that you were trying to reach through your use of color. That is it for what we have for this week. I think this is probably enough content. I'm looking at probably about an hour of recorded material in between these 2 links, which are imperative to view. You must view these as a part of this week's information of this video as well. I will have grades posted out there shortly this week as well, out onto D2L in case you were looking for those. As usual, you guys are doing a good job of emailing me if things come up or if you have technical issues or questions. Do not be afraid to reach out to me and let me know if anything's coming up. Things come up in an online class. This is traditionally a lab course where we're able to meet and work out these things in person and I guess manually on hand. We don't have that opportunity, so please take advantage. Let me know if you have questions that you've thoroughly thought out first, and then I will do my best to make sure that we're working in the right direction. Again, for impact of color, which is due at the end of next week, so not this weekend, but next weekend, those are 2 separate images, and then the black and white and duotone. You're going to end up with 1 black and white image and 1 duotone. So make sure you get the exercise uploaded for this week, and of course that goes again as a reminder out into the Dropbox section in the correct Dropbox. And let me know if you have any questions or issues with the whole process. Have a great week, guys.